wo investiere ich mein Kapital? Das ist das wahrscheinlich wichtigste.
Companies need to think carefully about where they invest their capital. That is probably the most important decision currently. Should it be based on geographic considerations? Namely, is it better to invest in your own market or abroad, especially in Asia or third countries? Which product sectors should you invest in? Which ones will continue to grow? And which sectors should you give up on? It is the same question as 100 years ago. Where do I invest my capital? But the situation has become more complex. First, because there are far more geographical markets in which companies can invest. Second, technologies and the technological environment will change radically. Just think of social networking with the likes of Twitter or Facebook, which people today take for granted. And banks will have to ask themselves whether they need a branch on every street corner. Perhaps branches will be closed down and all bank business processed online or via cell phones.
Und alle Bankgeschäfte werden online gemacht oder über das Handy gemacht.
I hope that there will not be any major differences to the present. Ideally, Germany will continue to have the same culture as today and will have the same or an even higher level of affluence. Of course, we will see different technologies and perhaps different fashions. For example, I can well imagine that ties will no longer be standard business wear. But these are superficial things. What is important is what goes on in people's hearts. Generally speaking, we are likely to continue doing as well as we are now, barring any unforeseen circumstances, such as natural disasters. But Germany is not threatened by earthquakes or tsunamis anyway. My hope is that Germany and the USA will finally cooperate more closely on energy issues, as well via the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the TTIP. At the end of the day, energy transition is a major topic in Germany, where energy prices are climbing. At the same time, energy prices in the USA are falling, and by 2030, the USA is even likely to be independent of foreign energy supplies. A partnership between the two countries, based on an appropriate treaty, could make German energy costs more bearable. Think about Germany's history. 12 years ago, Germany was the unwell nation of Europe. Look at us now. 65 years ago, Germany was devastated. Hardly any houses were left on the streets. War had destroyed so much. The Germans have accomplished to rebuild all of that, and therefore I think the Germans are strong enough to manage all sorts of problems. The USA's energy policy is quite naturally influenced by foreign investors such as China. Wage costs will, however, increase in China too, and even reach the level of those in the USA. Chinese growth will ease off somewhat, and it will experience enormous environmental problems since the country is hardly investing anything in its own environment, choosing rather to invest in business abroad. And it will be interesting to see what happens when a Chinese company takes over a DAX 30 corporation. It will be fascinating to witness the political reaction in such a scenario. Generally speaking, there will be more foreign investors in Germany.
Die Kultur in die USA ist sehr ähnlich wie die Kultur in Deutschland, aber mit ein paar Ausnahmen.
US culture is very similar to German culture, but there are a couple of differences. You can see this in a word like failure. Somebody failing in Germany is tantamount to a disgrace that can more or less put this person in the backwaters. If somebody fails in the USA, we look at it with our American mentality from a different perspective. Somebody who has failed and has fallen on hard times has learned something from the experience. Perhaps that person will not repeat the mistake the next time. This is why there is an equity culture in the USA, and in Germany a culture of debt. An equity culture creates something. For example, it generates venture capital that stands for the traditional culture of risk. This money can be used to fuel new ideas and business models for young people. If a young entrepreneur needs to be financed initially with a few million, he will be supported as long as he shows a good business plan with a launch capital of a couple of million. Even if this first attempt fails, there will still be support for new and better ideas, meaning that an entrepreneur like this can try again. So he can continue operating a business, and the person will someday be enormously successful. Every inventor in the USA wants to be, for instance, a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates. That may sound illusory, but the word fail is hardly ever used in the USA. Failure is more like an opportunity to learn and a chance to do it better in the future.
Wanneer wird das oder sie wird das in die Zukunft besser machen.
If you take a look at the top 1,000 global corporations, none of them come from Bangladesh, and hardly any from Arab countries. However, the political leaders of these countries are increasingly educated in the Western world, whether in the United Kingdom or the USA. For this reason, the leaderships there have had a completely different education than 50 years ago. Thus, a whole new generation of political rulers are returning to their countries with ideas and strategies that are different from those of their fathers. Education in these countries is actually considerably better today than it was 50 years ago. We know that there is a high level of unemployment in Saudi Arabia, but education in this country is very good. Of course, this is also being influenced by new communication possibilities. Nowadays, almost everybody in this country uses the internet and social media. That also reinforces the desire among different sections of the population for a better life than the one their parents have. They want their children to have a better life. Communications have changed things completely, and that is why I am convinced that the future will be better there than the past. In the field of financial services, we can observe something very similar. For instance, Citigroup has tried to build up a lot of branches for the consumer business, but we have realized it doesn't work like that in Europe with bricks and mortar. We have to change this plan and bring a totally new concept to the market that provides new services by using social media and the internet. To make your strategy a success, you have to be one step ahead of others. Our bank is very well known for it. We were the first to have cash machines and telephone banking. Now we have to think about the next innovative step. But we are not the only bank thinking of new ideas. Others too have very competent people.
Gewaltig. En der Grund dafür ist folgendes. Erstens, mit Social Media, man hat weniger Kosten.
Enormously. The reason for this is that you have lower costs with social media, and every financial services organisation must reduce its costs. These generally relate to bricks and mortar, where retail banking is concerned. The question is, therefore, whether you need a branch on every street corner. Basically, when you look at it logically, the answer is no. Using today's technology, you can replace a large number of areas in financial services with a cell phone or the internet. That is why new sectors will emerge that do not yet exist. People being laid off will switch to a new sector. That is a good thing.
Arbeitslos ist, die wechseln zu einer neuen Branche. Und das ist gut so. Jede Branche muss sich ändern. Auch die Finanzdienstleistungsbereich muss.
Every sector needs to change, and the financial services sector is no exception. Anybody failing to change will find themselves marginalised. That is why every bank must give at least a little thought to how they can service their customers in keeping with the times. Whether Google, IBM or Hewlett-Packard will also be given a license is not an issue for the private banking industry, but more or less an issue for our regional tutors. I have worked in this industry for over 30 years and I love competition.
Ich bin über 30 Jahre lang in dieser Branche tätig und ich liebe die Konkurrenz.
Competition brings in new ideas, new growth opportunities, and, I hope, greater customer satisfaction. Nevertheless, there is a risk with all these changes, cyber attacks. This may not be so obvious among the general public, but cybersecurity is an issue for every bank and every business in every conceivable sector, since it always impacts our privacy, regardless of whether cyber attacks come from China or from other countries. Trust in electronic transactions can soon be lost following such an attack, and trust is the be-all and end-all in the financial services sector.
Elektronisch ihre Transaktionen zu machen. Und Vertrauen in den Finanzdienstleistungsbereich ist das A.